Bugünkü konumuz biraz önce Ezgi Hanım da bahsettiği üzere Quest'in Recovery Manager for Active Directory ürünü olacak. Ben çok kısa SoftwareONE'ın rolünden bahsedeyim. Biz SoftwareONE olarak Quest firmasının Türkiye'deki distribütör firmasıyız. Müşterilerimize direkt değil, endirekt partnerlerimiz aracılığıyla satış yapıyoruz. Ancak tabii ki müşterilerle temasımız hem pre-sales aktiviteleri anlamında hem satış sonrası destek ve danışmanlık anlamında devam ediyor. Bu konuda hem müşterilerimize hem de partnerlerimize destek veren, yani katma değerli bir distribütör firma olarak Quest konusunda çalışıyoruz. Tabii ki Quest dışında birçok yazılım ürününde Türkiye'deki distribütörü ve reseller'ı konumundayız. Fakat bugün o konulara girmiyoruz. Çok uzatmıyorum. Bugün bahsedeceğimiz ürün Recovery Manager for Active Directory. Ezgi Hanım da bahsettiği gibi niş bir ürün, ancak Active Directory kullanıcılarının iş sürekliliği anlamında gerçekten çok önemli fonksiyonlara sahip ve ayrıştırıcı özellikleri olan bir ürün. Ben sözü çok fazla uzatmıyorum. Sözü Quest'in Türkiye'den sorumlu yöneticisi Burcu Hanım'a bırakmak istiyorum. Söz sende Burcu.
Çok teşekkürler. Herkese merhaba. İsmim Burcu. Yaklaşık 5,5 senedir Quest Software'de kurumsal satış müdürü olarak görev yapıyorum. Öncelikle hepinize hoş geldin diyorum. Umarım keyifli ve öğretici bir webinar olur hepimiz için. Ben çok kısa Quest'ten bahsedip sözü pre-sales arkadaşım Matthew'a vereceğim. Herkesin heyecanla beklediği session'ın da onun konuşması olduğunu biliyorum. Bu nedenle çok fazla uzun tutmamaya gayret göstereceğim. Quest Software 1987 yılında aslında kurulmuş bir şirket. Birçok farklı alanda faaliyet gösteriyoruz. Karmaşık sorunlara basit çözümler mottosu ile hareket ediyoruz. Sizlerin de gerek bu ürünümüzün sunumunda gerekse eğer kullanıyorsanız diğer çözümlerden de bildiğiniz üzere çok kompleks olmayan, basit ancak çok etkili bir çözüm ailesine sahibiz. 3 ana yerde faaliyet gösteriyoruz diyebilirim. Birincisi Cyber Security tarafı, ikincisi Data Operations tarafı ve üçüncüsü de IT Operations tarafı. Bu çözüm setimizin başlıkları altında 3 tane ürün grubumuz var. Bunlardan bir tanesi Microsoft Platform Management. Bugün bahsedilecek olan Recovery Manager for AD, Disaster Recovery Edition da bu grubun içerisinde. Aynı zamanda bu ürün ailemizin içerisinde migration çözümlerimiz var. Migration dediğimiz zaman da aslında aklınıza gelebilecek bütün migration şeylerini kapsıyoruz. Problemlerini kapsıyoruz. Yani tenant to tenant migration'dan node to exchange geçişlerine, SharePoint migration'larına, Enterprise Vault migration'larına gibi aklınıza gelebilecek her türlü senaryoda faaliyet gösteriyoruz. Bunun yanı sıra Cyber Security tarafında One Identity isimli bir çözüm ailemiz var. Burada da aslında Identity Management, Two Factor Authentication, Access Management, Identity Governance gibi çözüm ailelerine destek veriyoruz. Ayrıca çok yeni satın aldığımız OneLagoon firması ile de SSO tarafındaki eksikliğimizi kapattık. Şu an uçtan uca Identity Management tarafında destek oluyoruz sizlere. Bir de son olarak ISM tarafımız var. Information and System Management tarafı olarak geçiyor bu kısım. TOAD adı verilen çözümümüzle başlayan, yani veri tabanının yönetilmesiyle başlayan, sonrasında Foglight ve Spotlight ile beraber bunların monitör edilmesi, performansının izlenmesi, SharePlex ile bu database'lerin replike edilmesi, Foglight Evolve'la aynı database tarafında yaptığımız gibi sanal makineler üzerinde performansların ince izlenmesi, monitör edilmesi, herhangi bir sorun olduğunda buralara dokunulması şeklinde destek veriyoruz. Bunun yanısına son olarak satın aldığımız Irwin isimli bir firmamız var. Irwin'le de data tarafında modelleme ve data intelligence projelerini gerçekleştiriyoruz. Ben daha fazla sözü uzatmadan pre-sales arkadaşım Matthew'a sözü veriyorum. Kendisi size Recovery Manager for AD, Disaster Recovery Edition'da bugün sunacak. Matthew, it's now your turn.
Hi, so from everything you just said, I understood my name. That was about it.
I know.
My knowledge about Turkey goes down to the fact that you got some seriously fast people. I follow MotoGP and World Superbikes, and Toprak is doing unbelievably well. So if anybody of you are fans out there, I'm a huge fan of Sofoglu and his guys that follow him, to be honest. Today, I'm sure it's been explained what I'm going to be doing today. If I talk too fast, please mention it to Bujur and she'll slow me down. I tend to run away with things as well. I'm going to stop my camera at the moment. In actual fact, this is my second camera. For some reason, the other one just decided to fail on me. And I'm just going to share out my screen. So no big worries today. We're not going to be doing death by PowerPoint. I'm actually going to be doing a full step through of a scorched earth environment where Active Directory is deleted. There is nothing left of your Active Directory environment. And I'm proud to say that we are the only vendor that can recover from secure storage that entire Active Directory. When you start looking at any of the other backup vendors in the market, what they do is they restore a domain controller. And the problem you've got there is Active Directory is not a domain controller. Active Directory, as we all know, is a distributed, synchronized identity management platform that needs to have its health checked, as well as make sure that when it's doing its replication, the metadata and all the other components that go with making Active Directory are all in one piece. And like I say, with the other vendors, what they will do is they will spit back a normal domain controller, and that domain controller thinks it is the only domain controller in the world because you haven't stepped through the additional 40 steps that you would actually have to do manually to recover that environment. So the first part, I'm just going to step through one or two slides, and then I really need to switch over to the live environment because the process of the recovery can take up to 47 minutes. And yes, that's right, I can recover an entire Active Directory in 47 minutes. We actually have a case study out at the moment, which I'll go through or discuss slightly during this presentation. The first part of my slide is always conquering what's in for you for the next 20 years, or what we've been doing over the last 20 years and your next 20 years. The reason I go through this slide is not to tell you the history of Quest itself, but it's to point out the certain first things we did. The 20 years aligns specifically to the fact that Microsoft launched Active Directory at the end of 1999 in actual fact. So we've been with Microsoft on this journey from the beginning. We were the first ones that did a forest recovery solution. We developed that back in 2007, I think, if I'm correct here. We developed the first solution for Active Directory recovery, which was our standard edition. And what that does is it gives you the ability to do, granular restore. You don't have to reboot your domain controllers. Everything Microsoft was telling you that you couldn't do, we managed to do that with our first tool called Recovery Manager for Active Directory. It's just the standard edition. And then in later years, we came up with what's called the Forest Edition. And Forest Edition speaks to doing multiple recoveries of multiple domain controllers at the same time. So if you were somebody like Maersk, it would have come in handy with your 150 domain controllers that they actually lost. So we pioneered the first solution. We then went one step further and built in the ability to recover multiple domain controllers at the same time. And then beyond that, we've actually moved on to not only what's called Disaster Recovery Edition, which will also give you the ability to come back from 0 domain controllers being around in your environment. And we have the added ability to also extend that into what we call on-demand recover. So that takes care of your Azure Active Directory environment, and we can link the two of them into a single solution so that you can manage the recovery of the cloud object, and the cloud solution will actually instruct the on-prem environment what it is that it has to do in that recovery process. again, first to market on that as well. And then I'll just click through the rest of this. I mean, there's lovely things about who we acquired, but it's not really of relevance today, to be honest. What we're talking about is, as I've said here, whenever you look at Quest, specifically in the NPM portfolio, we do everything around Active Directory. Why? Because Active Directory is the heart of everything that you do in your business. If you have Active Directory down, and I've spoken to some CISOs about this in the past, where they've said that they have other mechanisms to get into their platforms. There was a simple question that I put to one of them: what is the mechanism that your user uses to log into their workstation? And the answer was simple: it's Active Directory, which means if Active Directory is down, every other system might as well be down, because what happens is you can't access your workstation, you can't carry on to work as well. So moving straight on from there again, I'm actually going to jump through this slide pretty quick. This was estimated to be the cost of malware or cyber crime in 2021, and we've actually hit it and surpassed it. If you look at the recent attacks that have happened, the estimate was $6 trillion in cyber crime. Every 11 seconds, a company is being hit across the globe with ransomware. Of those, it is costing per year, just on ransomware attacks, $20 billion. So it's a lucrative industry to be in, to be honest. And the last one speaks to just malware. Just the malware damage that's being caused in these environments is worth costing roughly 2.6 million per event that this actually happens. So at this point, I'm actually going to switch quickly back to my environment. Let me just tell you a little bit of what I've got here today. So I've got my app server, and I've got what it's called secure storage. So my secure storage server is a new feature that we have in RMAD DRE, where we can tell the platform, and I'll show you in the interface, that it needs to take a server, which I say is my secure storage server. We then use our software to lock the server down so that it only speaks out to us. Nobody can get into it. You can't ping it. You can't. I could tell you everything that we do, but it's our secret source. This is the first step towards immutable storage. So we've done the secure storage. The reason we've done secure storage is what it will do is it will grab a copy of your backup and keep it on that secure storage server. It stops people from messing around with your backups, because one of the things we've actually seen with attacks that go on, the malicious person or the hacker will sit inside your environment initially and establish where your backups are. What they will then do is they will attack those backups. So they encrypt or delete or destroy the backup infrastructure itself, so that you have got no choice but to pay the ransom when they do their next step, which is taking down your actual architecture itself. So what we did was the first step towards this is we've got the secure storage server. It is a workgroup only machine that you put into your environment. It is recommended that you do the installation manually. We do give you the option to do it automatically if you want, but obviously prefer to do a manual installation. We also recommend that this is a physical machine. So what you're seeing in my lab is obviously not a physical machine. It's the virtual machine, and that's why I've got remote desktop into it as well, which you would not have on those live environments. The rest of what you're seeing here is 6 domain controllers. So those 6 domain controllers represent the root domain, which would be the first 2. Then the next 2 is a subdomain, and the following 2 again a subdomain. Let me just click through to those DCs. So as you can see here, this DC is connected to Acme Lab, and that's DC number 1. And as you can see, if I go into the actual Active Directory here, into the domain controllers tab, you'll see it's Acme DC1 and DC2. And then again, you can see the structure of my forest that I've created here as well. If I go to the top, you'll see when I select, there's Acme 2. Again, that's my DC. And I'm just showing you this so that you know that I'm not pulling anything out, rabbits out of the bag here. I'm literally going to destroy this entire environment. There you see the 2 DCs for this domain. Again, this one is proving that it is part of that lab. There's Poodle again. Poodle is got 2 DCs inside of it again. And again, just to show you over here. Fort Knox is what I was talking about, which is actually the secure storage server. You would not be remote desktoped into a secure storage server. You would physically have to walk to the machine to actually get to your backups. And what we do is when this machine is set up with an agent, which I've done earlier, it actually has the installation and then creates a directory called Recovery Manager Backups. And what it does is it will go out as you execute your backups, and I'll show you inside the console, and it will grab a copy of those backups. This is what we refer to as a clean OS backup. So it's just a backup of Active Directory that we've done here. And again, the rest of those as well. So I'm going to move away from Fort Knox. I'm going to go back here, and I'll start with the actual, the RMAD console itself. In RMAD itself, you have two interfaces. One is for your day-to-day management of backups. Now, this is where, when you look at it, you go, well, you know, it's just backup. Backup is backup is backup. Everybody does it. The second console is what makes us stand apart, and I'll move into that in a second. If we start at the top over here, everything is wizard-driven with our application. So selecting one of these will step you into exactly what it has said here. I'm not going to be stepping through restoring a group policy object or actually a normal AD object. As we know, this is normal backup and recovery process. We have the ability to replicate this console to a second machine in a second data center, so that it gives you a form of high availability for the actual backup console itself. Moving down, again, we have backup agents that are deployed out to all of your domain controllers in your environment, so that this is when the backup is done, we encrypt, compress, and then move the backup to the location that you've specified. You can specify multiple locations to keep copies of your backup, depending on which process you use for the backup. So we have multiple types of backups as well. If I click over here, now this is what I was referring to earlier, the secure storage server. You'll notice the secure storage server is specified by IP address, because the one thing that you haven't got when you lost your entire Active Directory is DNS. Again, the reason why we have this machine set up in a work group as well is because you do not have authentication when you are about to recover your environment either. The one thing that's not showing here, which is coming in the next version, and this is a sneak peek for you guys because this has not been announced anywhere else. What we're doing is we are actually going the next step, which is we will be able to connect you into Azure with immutable storage. The immutable storage, if you know what that is like worm technology, write once, read many times. We are going to be releasing that within the next 2 months, so that it will be the next step where you can take that storage and push it through to immutable storage. And we will be extending this to AWS as well. The next component underneath this is actually where you set up your backups. So I've got full backups, where this one is what we call a bare metal backup. So we literally take the entire machine itself, back it up in the form that it is right there, which means, unfortunately, there could be viruses inside there as well. So we've got a function built into the tool as well, that we use Windows Defender, as well as we can use Semantic as of late, where we will actually scan the backup before restoring from the backup. So we'll update the signatures and we'll make sure we do that. So there is still a place for a bare metal recovery, but if you are facing an absolute disaster, which I'm going to show you, you would not use bare metal, you would use a clean OS restore. And that's what's set up over here. This just gives you an idea and a view of your directory as you've got it. There's the DCs as you can see it, there's the sites, there's the domains. All of this is obviously recovered from backup. The sessions speaks to exactly your backup sessions, and then obviously the backups speak to the type of backups that you've got. But that's enough of that. So this is the part where you shouldn't do this in a live environment. I would definitely not recommend it. All of these over here, it's going to take me a little while. So there you go. I'm not even going to shut them down. I'm actually just going to rip them out. The last time I did this on the last call, I actually heard somebody whimper, because the last thing you would want to do is actually do this in a live environment. And if anybody's got questions, please do come off mute, and you're welcome to ask it. And if you don't want to ask in English, you can also ask in Turkish, and Burcu will be able to interpret for me as well. This takes a little while, so you have to bear with me here. Has anybody got any questions at the moment? Come on, this has got to do it. There you go. That took a little while to delete that. Apparently that the main controller didn't want to leave the environment. And as you can see, I'll show you after they go down. Ozzy, I'll show you. You can see they're starting to die over the top over here as well. There's the next one, that's gone. There's our next one, she's gone. She's gone. I've got 2 left over here. And that's my root domain. Yeah, my next one. Some of these DCs like hanging on longer than they should. And the last one. Okay. So as I said, I've now knocked out the entire Active Directory. All I'm left with is my main, app server and my secure storage server. If I had longer and we wanted a lot more silent pauses, you could actually delete this server as well. All you would do is you would reinstall the server, and then you would import the backup into the from the secure storage server, which would then give you the full functionality that you see over here. So at this point, I've only got my 2 machines left. So now when I want to do a clean OS restore, I actually need obviously clean operating systems. This leads us onto another feature that we added to the latest version of RMAD. If you have Azure with storage and VM compute, what we can do is we can actually set it up in the recovery to spin up a domain controller in Azure and then do a restore to that. So that's another step in the automation of the recovery of Active Directory. I don't have that, so I'm just going to go here and I'm going to add some VMs from my company templates. I'll go over here to my templates, select company. You'll see that I have RMAD Clean OS. If I expand this, I'm not going to take all of them. I'm just going to bring back the 3 primary ones over here, add these VMs. It should take about 30 to 40 seconds to add them to my environment, at which point I'll then start them up. I can show you that they are actually just workstations connected to workgroup itself. Let's start these ones up. In the meantime, I'll switch back to my presentation and move on to the next one. So AD, the way that AD is being attacked at the moment is for that complete destruction of the environment. To give you some examples of how this is or where this has happened in the past, I'm sure everybody on the call knows a company called Maersk. And Maersk had 150 domain controllers that were all attacked and taken out in less than 2 hours. They literally had 1 domain controller left. That 1 domain controller was experiencing what I'm experiencing right now in South Africa, which is called load shedding, and that was in Ghana. They then had to, I actually spoke to the recovery team yesterday, actually one of our partners. They've now come on board as a partner, and I showed them RMAD, and they just wished they had had this when this attack had actually happened. They had to fly resources out from the UK to Nigeria, and then the guys from Ghana had to fly in from Ghana to Nigeria to hand over disk that was then flown to the UK to do the recovery of the environment. It took them 9 days to do this recovery. Our client, that is a global manufacturer, was hit roughly 2 to 3 months ago. They had RMAD DRE installed. Their first recovery phase, because we can do this in phases, I can identify, and I will show you as I do my recovery now, it's an actual phased recovery that I'm going to do. When they did their first phase, 1 hour, they were back up and running. The second phase was 27 minutes. This last phase was 37 minutes. A total duration of no more than 3 hours, and they were back up across 17 data centers globally with no impact to their operations. And as you can see, what I'm listing over here is there's been a few attacks on environments. And in actual fact, the next one over here was actually in Turkey as well. So the Honda was actually attacked with what was called the Snake ransomware variant, which targets domain controllers. And it stopped production in those countries listed on this as well. What we're looking at here is, like I said, there is total destruction in these attacks. And why I say total destruction is the Maersk attack, there was no decryption key. There was never an intention to decrypt those domain controllers. It was about taking out what was in the environment, and that was it. These three companies, Maersk, Coors, which is a beer company as well, and the global manufacturer, they all have something in common. They use Active Directory, but the one has one thing that is slightly different, and that was the global manufacturer that actually had RMAD DRE in place. With the problem that you also have when you start looking at Active Directory where you've moved into a 365 environment is you actually double your attack surface. So what you're doing is you've extended yourself into 365, and this is where we have to introduce additional tools to start looking after 365 as well. We have in our stable of products, we have, as I mentioned, on-demand recover, which can work in tandem with RMAD DRE to recover mistakes inside of 365 or again on-prem itself, but in tandem, meaning that I will get the platform from 365, from ODR, to actually instruct my on-prem RMAD variant to action what it's supposed to do during that recovery phase as well. If you know, with the setup of a ADC, it's every 30 minutes you replicate all changes to the cloud. A simple example would be you delete a OU, you delete 1,000 users. What actually happens is that will replicate up into 365. That will then delete the user and all associated resources that are associated with that user. So you need a solution that can bring it back. And if your reliance is on what's called the recycle bin, unfortunately, you're missing a lot of attributes when you're using the recycle bin to bring things back. I've got it later in these slides, I've actually got it, but I'll talk about it now. Things like conditional access policies, which a lot of companies are starting to use because it's far more secure utilizing that type of policy inside of 365. This is not brought back from the recycle bin. Neither are the linked groups. Neither is one very simple thing that's not brought back is the license itself. So without a license in 365, there's nothing that you can actually do within 365. I'm going to switch back again to my lab environment. As you can see, these servers are online now. I'll just log into the servers to show you that they are indeed just workstation machines. Let me just bring up the other two as well. So as you can see, I've just named them very similar because that's what domain they will be taking control over again. Let me switch back to this one. As you can see, it doesn't even know what network it's on. Go through my server manager, which I'll do on each one again. And lastly, Poodle. Switch back to this one, go to the local server. As you can see, there's the machine, there's the work group name. machine, workgroup name, and machine and workgroup name. That's it. Like I said, those three machines are actually standalone machines. At this point, I'm going to minimize this console. I don't need that anymore. Now I'll open my forest recovery console. All of our forest, the project that you build up when you're actually, so you don't do this at the time that you have the crisis. You've already prepared for this beforehand. There's two reasons to do that. One is obviously you want to be ready to go when this type of thing happens. Two is our product produces two reports. And if you're a listed company, there's certain rules that you have to adhere to. One of them is producing a disaster recovery plan. And the other one is proving that you do fire drills. Our tool does both of these. One is when you've built this plan up, you will have a printable report that shows exactly what steps it is that you're going to be taking to recover the environment. And the other one is when you play with this in a sandbox environment, or your fire drill that you are supposed to do, at the end of it, it will produce the outcome of your fire drill, which again, you can get through to the auditing department to prove that you've actually complied with those rules. I'm very secure, so I use a 1, but in actual fact, what you do is you put in a complex password here because this is then used to protect and encrypt your recovery plan. Keeping in mind that your recovery plan has critical data inside of it based on Active Directory. So you don't want anybody really getting into these things. As you can see here, I've got the 6 domain controllers that I've deleted. I'll go through a couple of things at the top over here. If you look at this one where you update your project, what happens is Active Directory is not a static environment. So as you add or remove domain controllers, you need to constantly update this plan. So just as simple as starting up here, update plan, check for changes. What it will do is it's going to actually come back and it's going to error now because I do not have any domain controllers in my environment. As you can see, it's trying to speak to this domain controller at the moment. It will eventually error out, and I will then have to obviously go into my recovery process. Not going to speak to me. Can't say we don't give it long enough to actually do the error. Thanks. Great. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is, as I've mentioned, I'm not going to recover everything here. I'm going to recover 3 of these servers. That one, Aussie number 1, and Poodle number 1. So let's start at the top over here. I'm just going to explain these menus over here. What this is actually the type of recovery method that I'm going to use in the environment. So at the moment, I've selected Restore Active Directory on Clean OS, which is the most efficient way of bringing Active Directory back with the reduced risk that you will not have viruses sitting inside of that backup. You could do what I said over here, which is bare metal backups or recoveries as well, which would mean that I would actually build the media, the ISO that you need to boot the machine. You then set that on the machine, it boots and it starts speaking to this platform because obviously you've used this platform to create that ISO, and it will then pull the bare metal image back onto the machine. You can just reinstall Active Directory, which means it would actually uninstall and reinstall Active Directory and then sync it naturally up to date. You can actually use the tool to install Active Directory. So if you're putting in a new domain controller, you can use this as a tool to actually do that installation for you. Uninstall Active Directory is obviously taking Active Directory off. But when you do things like this, it's not just uninstall Active Directory. What we do is we clean up all the metadata inside of Active Directory that refers to this domain controller so that you've got a clean, healthy environment at that state. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go select my second one. Then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, right, I don't want to recover this right now. But I mentioned the phased approach that we're talking about here. So you can do these servers first, then you could do the more less critical servers afterwards, and that would be your second phase. And again, you could do third phase if you wanted to. So at this point, I'll keep this domain controller in my project. The second one over here, I'm going to do the same setting. I'm going to drop it down to do not recover, and I'm going to keep it. The third one, Poodle over here. You know what? I don't like Poodle. Poodle keeps on blue screening on me. So I'm going to use this opportunity to actually take Poodle out of the equation altogether. So I'm not going to recover it, and it will be removed from this plan after I do an update. However, there's two things at the top here that we can do. I'm not going to step through the first one because it does the same as the second in a disaster recovery scenario. What this does, and we recommend that you run this, you can run it on a schedule as well. It will verify the settings based on a schedule. So it will check everything you selected to be done in your recovery process. Will it actually work? So it runs through and it generates that report after it's verified those settings as well. Obviously, if you're doing a clean OS restore, it will not be able to verify all the steps. You would have to allow it to go past the verification of a domain controller, because it will find the domain controller exists, which means it will not move on with its process. These are all securities that we built into the tool as well. Beyond there, we'll have a progress meter over here with all the tasks that we're about to perform, and it will actually list out each stage as it does it. I'm going to go into forest recovery method because this speaks to what we're doing at the moment. In forest recovery, each one of these, we set the domain admin and the passwords that we're going to be using. We can tell it that we want to rebuild the global catalog at the same time, or in my case, I'm going to keep the GC intact. Notifications, if you want to send out those mails so that you don't have to watch this process all day long. Agents, whether you want to deploy agents at the time of doing this or they're already installed. And infrastructure was what I was talking about, where you can spin out to Microsoft Azure. And in actual fact, if you've got Hyper-V or ESX, you can spin out to those locations as well to actually create the machine that you need at that time. Again, I'm going to cancel out of this. And I'm going to just go ahead here and start my recovery process. At this point, we notify you, and you'll see through all the things we're talking about there. This is the nuclear option. This is everything's gone. You don't do this lightheartedly. You have to have checked that there's no other way you can come back. At that point, we're mentioning here that have you contacted Microsoft Customer Support Services? The other thing, if you read through the rest, you'll notice down the bottom here, have you informed Quest Support? We always recommend to our clients that should you experience the worst experience in your life, which is trying to recover Active Directory from 0 DCs out there, log a support case with Quest, because we have experts on the back end that are then notified that you're going through this process. So we're ready to actually respond to you on mail or on telephony, whatever it is. You have an open case, and in actual fact, there is two architects in the US as well as in EMEA and across our region that will respond to this, given the fact that you're going through this. You're obviously, you need to be used to being able to do this yourself, but we're there just in case you need a little bit more help. At the bottom, obviously confirm that you've done these steps. Continue through the next one. We again warn you that it's going to make irreversible changes to your environment. Again, just to select, I understand that. At this point, if you've been attacked by malware, the chances are that one of your admin accounts has been compromised. So what you should be doing is resetting all of those admin account passwords. So we give you the ability here. I'm going to uncheck it at the moment because it makes it easier for me. But we give you the ability to go to all of these groups and reset all of those passwords. You could obviously speak to those group members afterwards to tell them what those passwords are. But since you could have been compromised, we recommend that you actually reset all of these passwords at this time. Then click next, and it starts the run process. What you'll see is these three servers will then start their preparation phase. They'll move through into getting information about the computer from backup. We're ensuring that the forest recovery agent is installed and running on these individual machines. If I switch over to these over here, what we're going to see is it's going to find that it's not installed. And eventually, when I go into my task manager, you'll see that the process will kick off with the installation of that agent. I should have given these machine more RAM. That's what I was just thinking to myself right now. Still trying to find it, so it'll eventually come through here. Malware is also obviously detecting processes that are going on in the box at the moment. There you go. There's the agent that's been installed on this machine now. And again, it will do the same to the other two DCs. So during this process, what we're actually doing is we isolate the domain controller itself. And you'll actually see there's a step down further down here where we actually isolate the domain controller. The reason we do that is these DCs all believe they are the only DC in the world. They have no idea that anybody else is supposed to interact with them. So we do the resets and all the 40 steps that are listed through a process of recovering Active Directory. We will do it on all of the DCs that we're restoring. Only at the end of this process will we actually tell the DC, sorry, but you've got a whole lot of other buddies. And these are the buddies. These are where your FSMA roles are going to be sitting. And we get through that final phase as well. This process, I've measured this a couple of times, is going to take up to 47 minutes to finish this process. So obviously we're going to be talking about a few other things in the interim. As you can see, this one's already moved on pretty fast. Should this machine actually get ahead of the other machines, it's got stop checks built into it where it will stop and wait for the other machines to actually catch up with the process as well. So again, you'll see here that the forest recovery service has now started on the machine. Aussie should have already been started as well. Forest recovery service is already there as well, and the same will go for Poodle as well. There's your forest recovery service running on these machines as well. So as said, this is going to move through its process at this point, doing all the required steps to actually bring us back to a stable environment. I'm going to switch back to the slides at this point. And as mentioned, this tool that I'm working with, it obviously has the capability of working with our cloud offering for Azure Active Directory. When we look at the actual solution itself, when we started off with RMAD, if you look at the lighter, or the darker blue, I suppose, at the top where it says automatic backups, your comparison reports, bulk and granular recovery, that was the RMAD release that we did back in 2000, or yeah, it would be 2000 when we first came out with it. The comparison reports that we have there is literally when you are doing a recovery of the environment, we will bring up we unpack the backup and we can compare it with the live environment to show you a report of exactly what's changed. How is this beneficial to you? This is beneficial in the fact that you can actually immediately see from a report what has changed in this environment so that you can target what it is that you want to restore. So you don't have to restore the entire OU, you would restore just the change components of that. So critical to have things like that. Where this also helps when you've brought into the ecosystem of Quest, you have, let's say you have Change Auditor. So Change Auditor integrates with this solution as well. What I do with the solution is I will take a backup of your Active Directory, say at 3 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, I have given you 5 different group memberships and I've given you permissions into whatever it is that I've actually done with your AD account. At 5 o'clock, if I delete your account and I do a restore of your account, I'm going to be restoring you to 3 o'clock, am I not? So what we do, because Quest knows what's changed with Change Auditor, we integrate the solution with Change Auditor, and we can actually bring back the changes from 3 o'clock to the point of deletion back into your account. So we will restore the object and we will bring back what is sitting in Change Auditor. Another way these solutions then work together as well is we have what's called IT Security Search. And IT Security Search, if you've got our products in your environment, is a free add-on that we give with any one of the 5 products. So Change Auditor, Intrust, RMAD, Active Role Server, and Enterprise Reporter. You are able to install what's called the IT Security Search, at which point you can hook IT Security Search to Change Auditor and RMAD in the same console. When you do a check for what's changed in your environment, not only will we check in Change Auditor, we will go to the backups as well and actually be able to bring back what we see in Recovery Manager as a change as well. And then, as mentioned, we went to that automation of recovering a forest. So Microsoft's recommended way of recovering a forest environment to this day is server by server. I've personally seen a document that was written out for a very large government institution. The length of the document for a recovery of their environment was 1,000 pages. I am not lying, it was over 300 pages per document, and there was 3 documents. The last thing you want to be doing when you have a crisis that I'm showing today, or when you have a crisis of 1,000 users being deleted, the last thing you want to be doing is reading through a 1,000-page document to try and get yourself up and running. Depending on who you are, whoever your CEO is, he's not going to be too happy with you if you're costing his environment as well. As I mentioned, the comparative reporting, we have total comparative reporting across what's in the backups versus what's in your live. The resilience of your critical domain settings, things like your entire sysfile, as it mentions there, your DNS zones are backed up with this as well. DFS, distributed file system root, is also, those settings are backed up, as well as group policy objects. So natively, you can't restore group policy from a backup. What we can do is we can actually restore the individual group policy out to the environment as well. Then I mentioned this earlier, and this is what we are doing at the moment. We have a total loss of Active Directory. We've had global destruction across, as I mentioned, one of our clients did, 17 data centers around the globe. What we've done is we had our plan set up in the beginning, or I set it up in front of you, to do a phased recover. When you do the phased recover, you hit those first important locations. So let's say you've got SAP in your environment, you've got domain controller sitting right next to SAP. Guess what? You want that domain controller back online as soon as possible. You don't want to be paying attention to an office that's got 300 people sitting in it that has a decent enough WAN link that they would actually speak to another site. So you phase it, you build it out. It is a plan that is already there in the interface, can be exported to a PDF document to prove to your auditors that you have a disaster recovery plan. And then the last phase would be recovering those other DCs. And this will be listed in that document as well that you give through to your auditors. Again, just hammering on the fact around why you would use this in conjunction with on-demand recover, because of the fact that Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, the recycle bin does not bring back everything that you need. Sure, there's probably other vendors on the market that do what we do within Azure Active Directory as well, but none of them have the integration, single solution to recover Active Directory and Azure Active Directory in one place. Our next evolution of on-demand recover, we are actually going to be launching a console in the cloud to manage both the on-prem and the cloud in one console. So in other words, I'm talking about those configurations that you were looking at. We would be doing that from the console in the cloud as well. So it just makes it easier for you to manage it from a single pane of glass, as they always use. This slide here steps you through the scenario that I was talking about earlier. And what we're doing here is we've had a deletion on-prem, and that deletion on-prem is then replicated after 30 minutes up to the cloud, which is obviously taking out group memberships, your apps and functionality in the cloud, as well as your access to Salesforce. So what we do with the Recovery Manager on demand is we will restore the actual access to those groups. We will restore the group itself, as well as all the links with conditional access policies. We will then instruct our on-prem RMAD server to reanimate the on-prem group, and that will then get the Azure Active Directory ADC connector to replicate that up, and you'll be back in the situation where you're in a fully functional AD environment. The next page is related to, everybody refers to this recycle bin. Firstly, in Active Directory, you actually have to turn it on. A lot of admins I've come across, forget to turn on the ADE recycle bin. In actual fact, with RMAD, we show you that you haven't turned it on because we can use it. You know, it's there for us to use. So if you wanted to use it, we can actually use it through our tool as well, and we'll tell you that you need to turn on this functionality. But as you can see from the list, bulk restore of multiple attributes, not possible with the AD recycle bin. Recovery Manager does it. The restore of modified user attributes, the restoration of group policies, the comparison reporting is mentioned as well. Compare the restore group memberships as well, and the restoring of delegation as well, which would not come back using that recycle bin. Then this one is actually more for the Azure side of things. And you'll see that there's a common scenario here. The restore of multiple attributes one time, again, not possible with that recycle bin. When I actually did a restore from a recycle bin when I was still an admin, it just occurred to me it was useless, because when it came back and I opened up the fields for the telephone numbers, for the address, nothing was there. So, and also if it's a hard delete object, it bypasses the recycle bin as well. So if you've got somebody that's being malicious, they're able to get it out and pass that recycle bin. I had one of my partners recently ask me, but really, is it that valuable? And I said to him, what are you thinking in terms of? And he's like, no, if I delete one user, I said to him, we work in enterprises. If you've deleted one user, by all means, it's a simple process to get that user back. And you'd probably be able to do it when you're using a recycle bin or when you're using a normal backup and recovery process. However, think in terms of the enterprise. When I make a mistake as an administrator in an enterprise, I'm not just deleting one account. Or if I'm being malicious, I'm definitely not just deleting one account. We actually had, I worked at an airline way back in the day. We had one of the administrators leave the environment, and he left what is called a time bomb. And 6 months after he left, the time bomb went off and deleted the entire finance OU. So these are the things that we're trying to help with by putting in automation with RMAD recovery. This will be one of the more important slides for you, just to give you an idea on the recovery process based on the size of your DIT file, your actual Active Directory file in your environment. I skipped through most of this. I mean, some of our huge customers, like I say, have got over 50 gigabit DIT files. But the nice thing down the bottom is here, we're looking at 350 gig Active Directory DIT file was restored within 4 hours. And the whole rest of the forest recovery process took 5 to 6 hours. This, with a normal restore process, will take you between 5 and 7 days to do it with native tools. And the same thing, we've done a bit more on the throughputs that we're getting out of the tool as well, and the recovery process that we get. I'll be able to share this with you after the call. We just switch back to our live environment and see how we're doing. As you can see, they're all pretty much at the same step in this process. We've gone through where the prepare to start phase, prepare to restore from backup. So we've moved through that. We've actually even installed Active Directory domain services. You will see that they've all actually rebooted at this point. So that's why they're not logged in. And then we're moving through the process here. We're down to perform restore from backup, restart the domain controller in DSRM mode. Now, that's another thing to bring up here. How many of you have your DSRM password? Because the majority of people that I know don't have that password. Again, our tool has got the ability to reset that password for you. A very bad practice by a lot of domain administrators is to make that password the same as your domain admin's password. And unfortunately, that either gets forgotten because you should be changing your domain admin password. Somebody hasn't recorded it properly, put it into a safe. The safe that it was put into is uninstalled one day, it's gone somewhere else. We take care of that inside this tool. We'll reset that DSRM password so that you can restore in authoritative mode with those domain controllers. We disable the custom filters for passwords, restore the data, restoring data from backup, and this one now is moving on to the restore domain controller in normal mode, or restart the domain controller in normal mode. If they're all doing that, they should be, there you go. There's one that's stopping over here, restarting. I must have been hovering over that server, which one I was on the first one. So this one is actually, you can see the icon has changed. This one's rebooting at the moment. This one should come up and then start waiting for the other DCs to actually catch up to it at the end of that phase. And then it goes on to the final phase, which it will then start configuring domain controller. This one, there you go. This one is waiting for the other domain controllers to come back online. And these ones are still restarting. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit selfish with my RAM, and these machines are actually sitting with 2 gigs of RAM each, so not the fastest environment. It was the one step that I missed in this recovery process. I should have actually just pushed it up to 4 to 8 gigs in actual fact. But while it's all doing that, let's switch back over to the presentation. Again, we started with RMAD. We moved on because the world moved on to the RMAD FE edition. In actual fact, we're probably going to stop RMAD FE edition and only lead with RMAD DRE, so Disaster Recovery Edition. The other things to mention here is that from the Forest Edition level, we actually started building in the forest checks, health checks into the platform itself as well. So we'll check replication, we'll check the RID pool, we'll reset the RID pools. We also have the ability to do resets on your Kerberos tickets as well. So if you've heard of something called the golden ticket attack, so your Kerberos ticket, what the attacker will do is they will extend the lifespan of that ticket. And should they do that, they would be able to come back into your environment anytime, and they will be able to take over your environment because they've got the golden ticket, which gives them access to everything. 2 ways of dealing with this. One way is doing a reset. We've got it in the tool where you can do a reset. Microsoft recommends twice in quick succession, which we do after we've done this, so that we invalidate any of those tickets that are out there. The other one is the natural fact with Change Auditor, if you've got it. If you've got Change Auditor has the ability to track and find a golden ticket attack. So it will check to see if your policy matches the golden ticket that it sees. And it will be able to tell you that it's not, and at which point you could then come to this. There's a manual process you can use in PowerShell to do this process as well. But by the end of this recovery, I'll be able to show you how you do it by clicking a button. And obviously, we also built in what's called a virtual lab. And the virtual lab takes your backups as you've made them and gives you the ability to spin out a lab environment of your live AD. So when you want to do those schema updates or any of the considered dangerous actions on Active Directory, you first spin it out to a virtual lab. Do your tests. Make sure that you're comfortable with doing what you want to do, and then go do your change in your live environment after you've run your backup. Obviously, because we can recover that should there be a schema failure. This is the end of the slides. I do have a couple of other slides at the bottom here, just showing you exactly what I showed you inside the tool, where we have multiple restore or flexible recovery methods within the tool, and you can change these at the point of doing your restore. Obviously, with a bare metal, you have to have done a bare metal, but if you look at a bare metal backup, we won't even store that on a domain controller because of the size of it. It's obviously the same size as the DC. Even in my lab environment, you're looking at 19 gigs for a bare metal backup. It's got its place, but I prefer doing clean OS. When you do these clean OS, I like storing them on the DC, because that gives me quick access to actually do a recovery of attribute and object level. I also then obviously want my secure storage server installed to pull it off to. And at that point, I would then look into the option on our next release of the product. I will look into the option of actually storing it in Azure as mutable storage, which means, again, nobody can touch that backup or interfere with that backup at that point. It's the same as having a worm drive on-prem to do this. The bare metal recovery is just to automatically restore the full DC as it was. So in case your administrator actually had some information stored on that server that you still wanted back, you would actually get that back as well. The diagnosis, I'll step through this in the console when we're finished as well, but we also have the ability to obviously first check whether our agents are up to date, but beyond that, we also have, as it says, the reset DSRM password, DSR, I don't know why I get that mundled up, DSRM password. We have the ability to reset that, and there's other components for health checks inside of Active Directory that we're able to do as well. And I mentioned this earlier as well, is once you select this check mark within your recovery plan, what it does is before it uses that backup, it will actually scan with the latest updated signatures. It will scan that backup to see if there's any malware sitting inside that. It's just an additional layer of protection. We have, as I mentioned, phased recovery of those environments. So get those critical environments back up and running first, then do the rest of the environment. And recovery methods, recovery media, which we can actually spin out ISO images, which you can boot your machine off of. Once we create that ISO image, you boot your machine and it will look for the RMAD server that as it finds it available, and it will start that process as well. I'm not going to click through the rest. I'm actually more interested to see if my lab is moving on. It is actually moving on. So we are setting the internal sysfile replication mode, if applicable. Now, these are the processes in this area here that your administrator has to do himself. And he has to do this on every single domain controller. And he's got to keep the sequence right as well to make sure that he pulls that environment back. If you're using any of and I can't say competitors here, and I can't stress this enough, we do not have a competitor in this region. I do not say that you should not buy the likes of the other, the Acronis's out there, the Veeam, whichever backup solution it is that you want to work with. You need those for data, but they are data recovery solutions. We are recovering an environment. We're recovering a live Active Directory environment. So the steps that were listed out here, we don't make them up. This is what Microsoft explicitly tells you that you need to do with every single domain controller that you bring back from the dead. So we're automating every single step here. You can see things like where we've raised the RID pool, we then invalidate the RID pool. And again, as I mentioned, we're doing that on every single one. So that's the other domain. You'll see we did the same steps over here. Again, at the moment, these servers, they think they're actually alone. They don't know that there's actually another 2 DCs that are sitting in this environment coming back from nothing. We'll step through this phase over here, restarting the domain controller into normal mode. I think you'll find that this one has actually got to that. It should be that's on Poodle. Let's go see what Poodle's doing. Poodle is rebooting at the moment. So Poodle's coming back up in normal DC mode. We've got the next one following Acme is actually bringing back in normal mode as well. And the last phase of this project will take, it's not, I can't see this. This is probably going to be one of the quicker ones that I've seen. I did a test, obviously, before doing the session, and I was able to complete the entire process in 27 minutes to bring from scratch back up to an Active Directory running healthy in the environment. At this time, I'm going to pause and ask if there's any questions from anybody in the audience, anything that you'd like addressed.
Sorularınız varsa Mete'yi bekliyorum bu arada. Sizlerden.
I guess there's none for now, Matthew.
Well, it means one of two things. Either I'm very good or nobody understands me.
I think the first one. It was really good.
So look, obviously we're going to wait until this process finishes. I mean, obviously, this is what we've been talking about, the process monitor that we actually have built into the product so that you can see exactly what steps are being taken by it. The next one's pretty important because I've mentioned it a couple of times. So there's what it looks like. This is the recovery project plan that actually gets printed out from the solution. This is what you hand over to those auditors to say, this is my recovery plan for my environment. And then when they do come back again, and I know that specifically in my region, down in South Africa, if you're a listed company, I know in the US the same thing applies, you have to prove that you have done fire drills. I know that when I was in an operational environment, I used to work for a large petrochemical, we would actually take the backups off-site. We had to go to a separate building. We had the teams from Active Directory, the teams from Exchange, all of these guys that are actually operational staff members off-site to go and do this fire drill. So not only does that cost you money, but it leaves you at risk inside your environment because you're taking your resource and you're actually going and focusing on something else when they should be focusing on the day-to-day functions that they do inside of this environment. With using RMAD DRE, all you need is virtual machines that are isolated on their own network, and you can spin out and do fire drills exactly the way we're doing right now in testing that we bring that Active Directory back to a healthy state. End of that, you'll get a similar report to this, which lists out exactly what it was that you did. So in my case, where I have removed 3 of the DCs, it will list that in the report, that you had this, you recovered this, and these are the status of the other 3 machines that you have not recovered in your environment. We switch back and let's see how far we are now. Okay, so this one is waiting again for the other DCs to catch up with it again. It's restarting again. Let's see if we can give them a little nudge. So they both come back up to being Aussie administrator. This one should be Acme administrator as well. So we'll just have to wait to get through these, through that step. This normally takes roughly 3 minutes to get through this step. And then let's restart or reset the trust password. Because again, the other thing that is not taken care of by the other backup solutions on the market is anything where you've got a trust involved. They don't reset it. They bring the DC back. They don't check the trust. They don't reset the trust password. So if you can imagine, you've got an environment, and I don't think I've been into a single enterprise environment that does not have trusts in their environments. If you're in that type of environment, you want to know that if you have a resource domain that's got your Exchange server inside there, you want to know that the reset of that trust has happened so that you can actually use those resources that sit inside there if you had an Exchange server on-prem, for instance, which is a common scenario as well. Let's come on. Everybody just try and get this one to go through. And as I said, this one's waiting at the top over here. Let me see if there's anything else that I can show you in the interim. Most of this will be grayed out because of what we're actually doing at the moment, but this under the tools over here, you'll see at the top over here, it says update project. I mentioned that when I go into it after this, I will be able to do an update to the project because it will speak to the DC that has come back. Obviously launching Active Directory Recovery Manager. Normal tools that you would want to get to those DCs, in actual fact, the recommendation is to start disabling RDP. When you start managing this, I know this is in very light gray, but you'll see here, you're able to use the tool to manage the FSMA roles, the global catalog server roles, the DNS client settings, as well as Kerberos, purging the Kerberos tickets. This is what I was talking about with that golden ticket attack, where you would actually execute this twice to reset that golden ticket as well. And then diagnosis, again, this will be to check your forest health environment as well as checking your collect diagnostic data from the endpoints themselves. And then fault tolerance, I mentioned that with this, you can have multiple consoles for RMAD in different areas. The only thing that you need to do is when you're doing the backups, you obviously need to have multiple locations of that backup data. That's something I could actually show you right now, since we've got this, where I go into my backups, and I'll show you over here. We have the ability here. So this is based on the type of backup I've selected, which is an AED backup, so clean OS, or a bare metal backup. When you do this, obviously encryption is important. I'm not doing it in the test environment, but you do encrypt your backups with password, and it uses AES to do the encryption of those backups. There's the local storage. So local storage means put it on the DC. So if I want to get to the recovery of an object or attribute, I've got it there. It's quick. I'm able to do it. Not the best place to store something that you need for long-term retention of data. Remote storage is where you can put it onto a separate server. So this is where you specify your path. And in here, we actually use expressions to then name the backup file itself. You'll notice down here where I selected save backup copy to a secure storage server, again, speaks to the IP address, not to the actual name, because again, you don't want to give away, firstly, the name of the server that you've got your secure storage on. And secondly, you don't have DNS when you first come back from a recovery. One of the questions that I would have expected from people is, if you're coming back from absolute disaster, how do you recover without Active Directory? So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm actually using cache credentials. So I'm using cache credentials on that machine. But I'm also, because I've got the backup stored with credentials, I'm able to do this using the local admin of that machine as well. So I could have rebuilt this machine from scratch, logged in as a local administrator, pulled back my, well, in actual fact, I'd have to go copy my backups off of my secure storage server, bring them back onto this machine, register them inside of the console, and then start building my recovery plan from there as well. So you can, as I mentioned, recover not just from total loss of AD, but you can also recover from the loss of this console. But again, we have the ability to replicate this console with all of its settings to another machine so that you could actually just switch to that machine and start using it as well. This just, like I said, speaks to that storage. Unpacking a backup is a nice feature. We recommend to our clients that you actually do not unpack your backups all the time. I know it's very convenient, but again, one of the attacks that I mentioned earlier, or maybe I actually didn't mention this one, it's called shadow copy attack. So if you've got change auditor, you can detect and prevent that type of attack in your environment with functionality inside of change auditor for AD. We monitor and prevent the copy of the database. But when you do an unpack of a backup, make sure that you're doing that to a secure location, because you're actually unpacking the ntds.dat file, which means if I can get to that, again, I can crack it and attack you using it as well. So just, little things that we got to keep in mind, that your global settings should be set to not unpack, do not unpack backups. Beyond that, performance, you can actually even tweak your throughput on your network so that you don't overload your network with your backups at particular times that you're doing this. Just go back down to our console and see how we're doing. Oh, there you go. So we're finished. Okay, so as you can see, I've recovered all 3 domain controllers. If I click over here, I'm going to just, this is the one point where we do tell the person that's working with us, as soon as you see this, if you drink coffee, get up, go make yourself a coffee, calm down, leave it for about 15 minutes, because Active Directory still has to sort itself out in the back end. If you know AD, when you log into that AD server, as you bring the DC up and you hit Control-Alt-Delete, you can often wait 5 minutes just for this thing to sort itself out. So again, so that you don't fall into a bit of a panic situation here, what we recommend is get up, go, make yourself a coffee, and eventually 15 minutes later, sit down when you've got yourself gathered again and start working through these processes here. So what you're going to see is I'm actually going to take a risk and I'm going to start clicking through these things over here. Just the last one over here is exactly what I said. So you've done this in a fire drill. You're able to go in here. It will just generate a short report that you can give to your administrator, or sorry, your auditors, proving that you'd actually done this exercise. You can see that I had domain controllers in the forest 6, succeeded domain controllers 3. And if you were to go through this, it will give you all the settings that I used as well. Getting back out of there, the Kerberos ticket. So as I mentioned, the Kerberos ticket, you would want to reset this, especially if you've had a malicious attack on your environment. You want to make sure that they did not get hold of that Kerberos ticket and they're able to attack you again. So all you would do, again, I'm hoping my environment is synchronized nicely. There you go. It's speaking to my DCs, all 3 of those DCs that I recovered. Select one of them and click OK. It's going to replicate the change of that password to that Kerberos ticket. And once it's done again, still replicating. Once it's done again, you just select it again and click it again. Like I said, twice in succession. Okay, so it's operating. I tried to close it as well. And that will make sure that you're safe to continue from there. If I go to the top of this, it's just the normal settings that you would want to see on your DCs. Is your DC pointing to the right DNS servers now? Because that often, if there's any, it's normally just with guys like myself, when we're in labs, we've got to make sure that we're actually pointing to the right DNS servers. Otherwise, we can run into some pretty serious errors because AD doesn't know what it's doing. This will go out to those DCs and it will pull back the DNS client settings, and we're able to manage those settings from this interface as well. Let me just log on to one of these environments just to show you that we should be all right over here. There's that password again. Okay. Back to this one over here. I was about to say Microsoft just made a new black screen of death, not a blue screen of death. Give it a couple of minutes. Remember, it's only got 2 gigs of RAM here. I see that my colleague has joined me on the call. Costa, just remember when you do this, give it 4 gigs of RAM, buddy. So we'll see over here under the admin tools, Active Directory domains and trusts. There's users and computers. Let's just select local server so you can see that it's now switched and it's actually part of the domain. Giving this poor little machine of 2 gigs of RAM way too much to do at the moment. There you go. So it's come up and I'll tell you the domain in a second. There's Acme Labs. She's back and she's healthy. Aussie's suffering. Aussies normally do suffer. And again, I'm giving it way too much to do at the moment. This is exactly why I say that you take that 15-minute break to make sure that everything is actually back to a synchronized order. Once you've done this, you can do forest health checks. This, I could get failures because I'm coming in too early again. Let's see if we click on forest. Let me click out of this. Okay, so what I would do at this point now, if I wanted to do my next phase, I could come down to these servers over here, go back to my general tab and say, right, I'm going to do an install Active Directory, which is actually using install from media. It uses that process. I'm going to say to this one, and I'm not, obviously, we're not going to sit through this process, gents, ladies and gents. It's just to show you what we can do here. This one, I'm just not going to recover. I've decided that's it. For him, I'm not doing anything. If I come up to the top here on forest recovery mode, I'm going to switch it. I'm going to do the re-promote stage. What it's going to do now is it's going to go through the environment. And if you watch the back end, you'll see as I click apply, it's going to do nothing to those other DCs, and it will only recover that one DC. I didn't save the other one, sorry. And there's our environment Active Directory back up and running. Computers, domain controllers, obviously only the one, but no errors here because of the fact that I have cleaned up all that metadata in the background as well. So all of the stuff that was associated with DC2 is being removed from the environment. And in actual fact, if I was to run my second phase, I would then reintroduce the DC into the environment with all the steps required to build a domain controller. I would then also invoke natural replication of AD so that it was up to date and ready to go. If I click over here, I should be able to change domain, browse. As you can see, it knows about its subdomains. If Aussie's, there you go, Aussie's actually responding now. And domain controllers, there's my Aussie there. And last but not least, if the demo gods are with me, we'll switch over to the last one. Boodle. Great. And Boodle is responding as well. Great. Okay, so I think that's where I'll leave it. I think it's a lot of information to take in. As you can see, full automation, my Active Directory is back up and running. The only thing you need to make sure that when you're bringing up a clean OS environment, in your plan, you have specified, as you can see, IP addresses. When you do that, so when the guy brings back your virtual machine that you need, just make sure that it's got the same IP address as you've specified. If not, and he's got a new one, go back into your plan, put in the new IP address, and you're good to go. Thanks very much. I really appreciate your attention today. And if there's any additional questions that you've got, please ask me now. Or afterwards, you've got my email address. I'm always on Teams as well. You're welcome to reach out to me for any clarification information you want. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It was a really great presentation, and I'm sure if they have any questions, they're going to write me too afterwards. And Burcu, Çağatay, size de çok teşekkür ederiz.
Biz teşekkür ederiz.
Okay.
Dediğim gibi yani Meteo'nun da söylediği gibi sorularınız olursa bizlere veya Meteo'ya her zaman sorabilirsiniz. Yardımcı olmaya çalışırız sizlere. Ayrıca sizden sorumlu account manager arkadaşlarımızla da temasa geçebilirsiniz. Şimdi istersen yarışmaya geçelim Ezgi.
Aynen öyle. Right now we are gonna make the Kahoot game, Matthew. Şimdi bir Kahoot oyunumuz olacak, bilgi yarışması. Daha önce etkinliklerimize katılmış olanlar da bilirler. Ben size hemen chatten girmeniz gereken URL'i gönderiyorum. kahoot.it. Bir yandan da ekranımı paylaşıp da sizinle oyunu başlatacağım. Hatırlatmakta fayda görüyorum. Doğru cevap artı hızlı cevap vermek önemli burada. Dolayısıyla biraz çabuk davranmanızı isteyeceğim. Ve hediyemizi kazanacak olan kişi son kullanıcı olacak. Yani eğer sponsor firmalardan biri ya da SoftwareONE'dan biri kazanacak olursa bir ikinci potansiyel müşteri ya da son kullanıcı dediğimiz kişiye gidecek. Ve oyun pinimiz şu anda ekranda. 289 52 44. Ekranımı görebiliyorsunuz değil mi? Çağatay, görebiliyor musunuz?
Evet, görüyoruz.
Görünüyor,
Harika,
evet.
tamam. Herkes girene kadar bekleyelim. Ödülümüzü hatırlatayım ben. Kazanana JBL Bluetooth hoparlör vereceğiz. Tamamen geri dönüşüm materyallerinden oluşturulmuş, doğa dostu bir ve sesini ben test ettim. Çok güzel bir hoparlör kendisi. Herkes katıldı mı acaba? Henüz kaydolmamış olan yoksa bir dakika daha bekletip oyunu başlatıyorum ben. Kaç kişi var şu an burada? Tamam, gelenler var. Oyunu başlatıyorum o zaman ben. ...2000 yılında ilk Active Directory'e özel yedekleme ve kurtarma çözümüne kim öncülük etti? Quest, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Evet. Çoğu kişi doğru bilmiş. Şaşırtmacalı soru olduğunu düşünenler olmuş olabilir. 2007'de pazarın ilk otomatik Active Directory Forced Recovery çözümünü kim geliştirdi? Microsoft, Google, Quest, Amazon. Ve evet, yine çoğu kişi bilmiş. Berkay Bey önden gidiyor. Ama çok az bir fark var bir alttakiyle. RMAD DRE'nin hangi özelliği alınan yedeğin mevcut stored backup'larla karışmasını önler? Tape Backup Media, Secure Storage, USB Drives, Storage Area Network. Bir kişi kaldı. Ve 8 kişi doğru cevap vermiş. Emre Bey öne geçti. Yine çok ufak bir fark var Oktay Bey ile arasında. Devam ediyorum. 4. soru. Matthew, Active Directory'de kaç tane domain controller sildi? Ve evet, çoğu kişi doğru bilmiş. Emre Bey hala önde. Berkay Bey çok yakın takip ediyor. Son soruya geçtik. Recovery Manager for Active Directory kullanıcıları hangi konuda yardımcı olur? Konularda. ...13 kişi doğru yanıt vermiş. Şimdi sonucu öğreneceğiz. Podyum. Berkay Bey 3. Oktay Bey 2. Emre Bey de 1. oldu. Emre Bey.
Podyumun bir ekran görüntüsünü alabilir miyim?
Tabii. Şu an görüyor musunuz?
Evet, bir saniye. Bunu kazanan arkadaşa POC hediyesi var.
Ay, şu anda.
Teşekkürler, aldım.
Tamamdır. Peki Emre Bey'i tanıyabilir miyiz, kazanan kişiyi?
Merhaba.
Merhaba Emre Bey. Kurumunuzu öğrenebilir miyim? Nereden katılıyorsunuz?
İş Bankası'na katılıyorum.
İş Bankası. Harika. Ben benim mailim zaten sizde vardır. Adres bilginizi ve telefon numaranızı rica edeceğim. Postalayacağız hediyenizi evinize.
Tamamdır, ben size e-mail olarak gönderiyorum.
Tamam. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz katılan herkese. Etkinliklerimiz devam edecek. Ben bu etkinliğin video kaydını da herkesle paylaşacağım. Katılmak isteyen ekibinizden ama katılamamış insanlarla da paylaşabilirsiniz. Tekrar çok teşekkürler Burcu, Çağatay. Thank you so very much, Matthew, again. See you in another event. Okay?
Great. Thanks, everybody. And if you need those POCs, let me know.
Okay.
Çok teşekkürler.
Teşekkürler.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz herkese. İyi günler.
Teşekkür ederiz.
İyi günler, hoşça kalın.
Teşekkürler. İyi
Sağ olun.
günler.
Thank you Matthew. Bye bye.
Thanks, Matthew.